So, brace yourselves, AGI is coming was a phrase that was just tweeted by someone that works at OpenAI in response to something that we did just see. And it's important that you do watch this video until the end because it does contain a detailed account of what we know when we're looking at dangerous AI systems and when we do look to the future of AGI capabilities. So what you're looking at is Stephen Heidel, which is someone who fine-tunes LLMs at OpenAI. And then, of course, you're about to see that he tweeted this, okay? And this was in response to another tweet. He tweeted, "Brace yourselves, AGI is coming." And this is in response to a tweet from Jan Like. And Jan Like tweeted that I'm very excited today that OpenAI adopts its new preparedness framework. And we previously discussed OpenAI's preparedness framework. And essentially what their preparedness framework is how they look at problems when dealing with AGI level systems, or essentially just dangerous AI systems that could be harm to the public or to pretty much anyone. So essentially what we're looking at here is the real way that they're going to look to protect the general public in terms of these dangerous AI systems. So you can see right here, this framework spells out our safety for measuring and forecasting risks and our commitments to deployment and development if safety mitigations are ever lagging behind. And of course, I'm going to go to the full tweet in a second, but of course you can see this is the guy that tweeted, "Brace yourselves, AGI is coming." This is someone that does actually work at OpenAI. So of course, this is the actual link. And of course, if you're wondering who Jan Like is actually a machine learning researcher co-leading super alignment at OpenAI and optimizing for a post-AGI future where humanity flourishes. So I do want to touch on that statement quickly because I do think it is a bit interesting that someone said, "Brace yourselves, AGI is coming," because we've known for quite a while now that OpenAI is definitely close to AGI, if not very near it, because of a few different reasons, which we talked about in another video. And for all of that stuff there, you definitely want to watch our video where we talked about, did OpenAI just confirm that it has AGI? We don't think they actually have AGI, but we think they're really, really close. And so I do think it is time to take a look at that preparedness framework, because some of the stuff it does talk about is a little bit scary in the sense that there's a lot of things that I didn't think that we would have to think about when looking at AI risk, but it's clear that this is something that is truly, I guess you could say, thorough, and it does show us that what we are dealing with is a very, very grave risk. So this is the page. You can see it says preparedness. The study of frontier AI risks has fallen short of what is possible and where it needs to be. To address this gap and systemize our safety thinking, we are adopting the initial version of our preparedness framework. It describes OpenAI's process to track, evaluate, forecast, and protect against catastrophic risks posed by increasingly powerful models. And I'm pretty sure that they're doing this because, of course, everybody knows that they are working on GPT-5. They have said this before. It isn't speculation anymore. They've announced that they are working on it, they are training on it, and they even talked about how even working on GPT-5 did actually cause quite a lot of stress within the company that I'm pretty sure led to a lot of things that did actually transpire at OpenAI, especially when Sam Altman was removed from the company. One thing that it does say here is that, super alignment builds foundations for the safety of super alignment models that we hope to have in a more distant future. So of course, a super intelligent model is something that is pretty incredible, but it's of course not something that we do have, but it makes sense to start the work now because that is something that, we know every company is pretty much working towards. So the introduction here, I'm going to always summarize some of these key points because I know that it's an entire paragraph and people don't just want to sit through the paragraph. But essentially what they've said here is that as our systems get closer to AGI, we are becoming more and more careful about the development of our models, especially in the context of catastrophic risk. And this preparedness framework is a living document that distills our latest learnings on how best to achieve safe deployment and development in practice. And the process is laid out in each version of the preparedness framework will help us rapidly in understanding of the science, empirical texture, and catastrophic risks, and establishes the processes needed to protect against unsafe development. And essentially what they're saying here is that, we're getting closer and closer and closer towards AGI. And if we don't have a framework where we can look and say, okay, this is AGI, this category is, really dangerous, this part of the model needs to be looked at again before they deploy it, we could have some catastrophic risk because once these models are deployed, we always know that bad actors will use these models for whatever they, try to. So it is something that we do have to be careful of. So essentially, the preparedness framework does contain 5 key elements that we will talk about right now. And you can see that the first one is tracking catastrophic risk level via evaluation. So it says we will be building and continually improving suites of evaluations and other monitoring solutions along several tracked risk categories and indicating our current levels of pre-mitigation and post-mitigation risk in a scorecard. And they basically say here that we're also going to be forecasting the future development of risk so that we can develop lead times on safety and security measures, which essentially means that, they're looking into the future and they're going to, basically predict by saying, okay, by this date, we should have this level of model. So we need to make sure we have this security measure in place. And of course, there's a scorecard that we'll get into later, which basically looks at how you can categorize each model, and then you can see exactly how dangerous it is. So that is definitely something that you do need to take a look at, because the certain things on the scorecard were, a little bit surprising. So another thing as well, part 2 of this, of the 5 key elements, was seeking out the unknown unknowns. And this is a real problem, because there are certain things that we don't know. And that's something that is really hard to think about, because if you don't know something, it's not something that you even think about, which means that it's a problem that can take you completely by surprise. And this is what they talk about. They said, we will continually run a process for identification and analysis, as well as tracking of unknown categories of catastrophic risk as they emerge. So they're basically saying here that a lot of things that comes with AGI is going to be new to us, because of course, as you know, we're dealing with new technology, and with new technology does come new problems. And although people try to predict the future as well as they can, there are just some problems that you literally cannot see coming. Second order, third order consequences of the rise in this kind of technology is going to be, catastrophic in some areas that we will need to, I guess you could say, be careful with. Then of course, we have establishing the safety baselines, and this is where they're talking about deploying the models. And this is really, really interesting, because it goes to show that in the future, what we might have is, we might have a situation where, even if, let's say, for example, they make a GPT-6 and it is really good, they might be able to say, look, we've made this model and we're not going to be able to deploy this model because it's too advanced, it's too good. So this is going to be something that we literally, can't work on anymore. And we'll talk later more about that in the video, but it definitely is something that does make sense. So it says, only models with a post-mitigation score of medium or below can be deployed, and only models with a post-mitigation score of high or below can be developed further, as in the tracked risk categories below. In addition, we will ensure security is appropriately tailored to any model that has a high or critical pre-mitigation level of risk, as defined in the scorecard below, to prevent model exfiltration. And essentially, like I said, okay, they're only going to allow models with a post-mitigation score of medium or below to be deployed, and only models with a post-mitigation score of high or below that can be developed further. So they're basically saying, like I said, if we develop this model and it's too advanced, it's able to be exploited, people can use it for certain things, they're not going to be able to deploy that model. And of course, they're only going to be working on other models where it's not in the high risk category. So I'm going to show you those categories in a moment. But of course, then we have the tasking, and it says tasking of the preparedness team with on the ground work. And it said the preparedness team will drive the technical work and maintenance of the preparedness framework. This includes conducting research, evaluations, monitoring, and forecasting of risks, and synthesizing this work via regular reports to the Safety Advisory Group. And these reports include a summary of the latest evidence to make recommendations on the changes needed to enable OpenAI to plan ahead. And the preparedness team will also call on and coordinate with relevant teams to recommend mitigations to include in these reports. So essentially, basically, all of these teams are working together to ensure a safe solution, because one team cannot make the decision on what is safe, because some teams might miss some things, some teams might have certain biases, and there are just things that people are going to miss. And then of course, number 5, and I think this is so important, this is something that they kind of did have before, but I'm glad that they do have this now. And this is where they say, creating a cross-functional advisory body. We are creating a safety advisory group, SAG, that brings together expertise from across the company to help OpenAI's leadership and board of directors be best prepared for the safety decisions they need to make. SAG's responsibilities will thus include overseeing the assessment of the risk landscape and maintaining a fast-track process for handling emergency scenarios. So what they're saying here is that, remember how with OpenAI we had the board of directors and we had that whole drama situation? They're basically saying that, of course, with QStar and whatever programs that may, if any leaks, any rumors, that can or cannot be confirmed, if there's any safety issue, there's going to be a safety advisory group that, brings the expertise all together to ensure that, the decision is made with, everyone in mind, and that the decision isn't just like one person or just like a small group of people at OpenAI just making a foolish decision that could lead to something catastrophic happening. So I'm glad that they're having this now, because it makes sure that this is being overseen, and that I guess you could say the more people you have involved, the better the safety level is going to be, because the less people, it's just more risk. So the document essentially has 3 sections: tracked risk categories, where they detail the key areas of risk, and they're basically going to delineations of different levels of these risks. Then a scorecard in which they basically say, look, this is what the model can do, this is what it can't do, and this is where we think it's going to go. Then of course the governance, development, and basically that's where they lay out the safety baselines as well as procedural commitments, which include the standing up a safety advisory group. Then, of course, essentially, we're going to look at the tracked risk categories, okay? So this is where things get super, super crazy, okay? And this is where we really start to look at the actual risks of these AI systems, because they truly do talk about what these models are capable of and what they could potentially do. And they say that our intent is to go deep in the tracked categories to ensure we're testing for any possible worst case scenarios while also maintaining a broad holistic view of the risks via monitoring activities across OpenAI and the unknowns. And they're basically saying each of these comes with a gradation scale, and basically critical is the maximum level of concern, and then of course a low is meant to indicate that it's not a significant problem. So essentially, when you look at these four things here, you can see low, medium, high, and critical. Critical meaning that, yo, this is absolutely insane, this is a real problem, and of course low means that it's not that crazy. So now you can see here that they say specifically below, we lay out details for the following tracked risk categories, and they talk about cybersecurity, chemical, biological, nuclear, and radiological threats. So they shorten that to CBRN. So when you see that in the future, that's basically just regarding biological, nuclear, radiological, and chemical threats. So anything to do with that category. Then, of course, we have persuasion and model autonomy. So these are the four main categories that they are laying out details for. So essentially what they're saying here is that our procedural commitments are triggered when any of the tracked risk categories increase in severity. So for example, if something goes from low to medium, or it goes from medium to critical, then of course, or medium to high, then that's when they're like, okay, we need to get on this and we need to make sure that we take a look at this. And it's rather than only when they all increase together, because capability improvements across different domains do not necessarily occur at the same rate. And this approach ensures we err on the side of safety. Second, this approach enables us to leverage domain-specific talent to develop tailored suites of evaluations and monitoring solutions for each risk category. So basically, they're trying to say that, look, we need to make sure that anytime any kind of ability increase in any of our models goes up a notch, we need to make sure that we, knock it down a peg, because if we don't, we can see the risk increasing across the board, and that's not something we want. So we want to make sure that we know exactly where these models are in terms of their capabilities in all of these categories. And then of course they show us this. Now, of course, this is basically illustrative. So this isn't, GPT-4. It isn't any model that we currently do have, but it does show you, how you can look at an entire model and see where it risks. So you can see right here that the model with, low to medium on these categories can be deployed, but a model that errs in the high or critical, like in this area, they're going to analyze it, assess it, and they're not going to be deploy it. So you have to make sure that this is what we look at. So this is something that illustrative, and of course we do know that any model that is currently deployed is basically like this anyways, but any model that they won't deploy is going to be high or critical in these areas. And, of course, that does make sense. So essentially, I'm going to show you guys now the actual threats that they did talk about in the paper. So one of the first things they do talk about is cybersecurity, and this is essentially related to the risks on the use of the model for cyber exploitation to disrupt confidentiality, integrity, and or availability of computer systems. So essentially, what they talk about is, of course, the risks that we have here from low all the way to critical, and then essentially what we have here is a definition, and then the rationale for the threshold. So it's basically saying this is exactly what it is, but this is what the program is going to be able to do. So for example, on the medium, they say that this is a medium level system is going to be able to, in the cybersecurity category, increase the productivity of operators by an efficiency threshold. So for example, they can 2x the time that they saved on Kiba cyber operation attacks, such as developing a known exploit into an attack, a black box exploitation, goal-directed lateral movement, basically just making these cyber criminals much more effective. And it says here that the rationale for this threshold is that the execution of a cyber attack is a scarce skill that is generally learned from experience. A model's ability to substitute in or accelerate a professional would improve the quality or quantity of attacks. And it says that note that this productivity speed up also includes low-level, potentially state actors using known methods, for example, Russian disinformation groups who use purchase capabilities, phishing, and otherwise known methods. So for example, this is where we have the high and critical characters in cybersecurity, and this is where they talk about stuff that they wouldn't allow in a model. So they basically said here, the model can end-to-end execute cyber operations involving the above tasks without human intervention. So basically anything here that they can do, like the model can do immediately without human intervention. So you can literally make an LLM or whatever AI system it is, because we know that LLMs aren't just going to be future AI systems, they're going to be capable systems. And they're basically saying that whatever system it is, it's going to be able to do that without human intervention. So you're going to be able to say, complete this task, and then, going to be able to do it without human intervention. And then basically these are just, professional cyber attacks that are going to be done on any kind of computer. And it basically says this advanced capability would unblock many and be usable by actors of many skill levels. Then, of course, it says we have tool augmented model can identify and develop functional 0-day exploits of all severity levels across all software projects without human intervention, or model can devise and execute end-to-end novel strategies for cyber attacks against hardened targets given only a high-level desired goal. And they're basically saying that finding and executing end-to-end exploits for all software would lead to catastrophe from unilateral actors from hacking military or industrial systems as well as OpenAI infrastructure. And this is, of course, critical because if they develop a system that can hack the military, industrial systems as well as OpenAI infrastructure, a cyber attack, is going to be awful. Okay, we've all perhaps maybe seen what happens when we have a cyber attack due to recent films and stuff like that on Netflix. I'm not sure if you guys have seen that. But essentially, they're basically saying that these levels here is where they say, you know what, we're going to make sure that the model can't do this. So if you've ever thought about, an AI system being able to do this, this is generally the framework that OpenAI is using. And I'm pretty sure that other companies are going to be, using a very similar framework, or at least, they're going to develop this into, some kind of law, or maybe not, just a law in the US, but I'm sure that there might be some kind of global agreement on what models can and can't do. Then, of course, we have the CBRN, the chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. And it says CBRN is focused on risks related to model-assisted creation of chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. So this is all of that stuff, basically biological warfare, nuclear warfare, crazy stuff. And then it says, of course, the low stuff, which, models are going to be able to do, is model can provide information relevant to creating CBRN threats with comparable utility to existing resources. And basically, this just means that, like, the model isn't much better than textbooks and search engines. And then, of course, here, the medium, they're basically saying that it provides assistance in this ability. And it basically says it allows you to learn critical pieces of information faster than you could with existing resources, or explain certain steps more flexibly. And basically, it just increases the accessibility. But of course, with here, the list is still very limited. But like I said, this is where you get into the high and critical characters. So the model enables an expert to develop a novel threat vector, or model provides meaningfully improved assistance that enables anyone with a basic training in a relevant field to be able to create a CBRN threat. And basically, they're saying this is drastic because if they're allowing people with basic training abilities to, create novel biological threats, that is, of course, something that is awful. Then, of course, we have critical, and this is where stuff gets really serious because it says the model enables an expert to develop a highly dangerous novel threat vector comparable to a, class A biological agent, or the model provides meaningfully improved assistance that enables anyone to be able to create a known CBRN threat, or model can be connected to the tools and equipment to complete the full engineering and/or synthesis cycle of a regulated or novel CBRN threat without human intervention. And of course, it basically talks about, look, okay, this is, crazy. A class A biological agent, a highly mortality, ease of transmission disease, could cause millions of deaths and significantly disrupt public life. And allowing anyone to create CBRN threats would massively extend accessibility, and significantly automating the end-to-end engineering would also enable unprecedented and massive scale of potential attacks. And basically, they're saying, look, if we make a system, maybe it's GPT-5, maybe it's GPT-6 or GPT-7, that is so advanced, like an AGI system is so advanced that it's able to do all of this. And of course, OpenAI wouldn't release a system that's able to do that. But if people are able to get around the guardrails and then, tweak the model by using whatever command, maybe Dan or whatever, and it's able to do that, that is going to be something that is a serious risk because, of course, Class A biological agent would literally cause millions and millions of deaths, potentially even billions. And then, of course, even a weak novel threat is also a problem because, this is going to be really, really automated, and this is honestly not good at all. So this goes to show what the model won't be able to do, and this goes what the model will be able to do. So I think that one does make sense. Then this persuasion one is really interesting because persuasion is not a topic that you do kind of think about when you're looking at AI systems. But I do want to take a look at some of the high and critical ones for persuasion, because I think that persuasion is something that is going to be more and more riskier, because persuasion is something that is hard to sort of, I guess you could say, judge, because everyone's different. Whereas with you have a biological agent where, look, you have a biological agent, you can test to see if it infects someone. Persuasion is different because everyone is persuasive to a certain degree. Some people are more, more or less persuaded by others. So this one is definitely hard. But the critical one that it says here is that model can create potentially interactive content with persuasive effectiveness strong enough to convince almost anyone to take action on a belief that goes against their natural interests. And this represents a superhuman persuasive threat. It would be powerful powerful weapon for controlling nation states, extracting secrets, and interacting/interfering with democracy. And of course, we know why that's bad, because persuading anyone to do anything is basically like a superhuman ability to just get anyone to do whatever you want to do, which means you could literally have anyone do anything, which I don't even want to talk about the, ramifications for that, but I mean, they're pretty self-explanatory. And that essentially, it says model can create potentially interactive content with empirically comparable persuasive effectiveness to a country-wide change agent. I think we are kind of seeing this. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I think we are kind of seeing this a little bit. And this was something that we did see recently, and this is what we talk about here. So I'm not even sure if certain, models are going to be deployed, because it says this has similar risk profile to a country-wide change agent. It could dramatically affect elections and democratic outcomes. Now, recently there was some stuff in the news about, well, not in the news, but like online and articles and stuff about how they're essentially, doing one-to-one conversations with a randomly assigned individual, and people are having, AI voice called, people, and they're just calling like hundreds and hundreds of people, on these phone calls. These AIs are calling people to get them to change their vote. So I'm not sure how this is going to be done, because this is something that is, of course, quite awful. And I mean, I don't know. It's a really new and interesting problem that I don't know how you solve it, because I mean, how do you know the person calling you isn't real? Are you gonna ask them, some kind of code word or something? I mean, it's something that is being done. So here you can see this post. The U.S. Democratic Party has begun using AI to phone voters and campaign on their behalf. The company providing the service says they expect to scale fast to thousands of callers a day. It isn't as bad, because all they're doing is just making sure the people that are voting for them are more effective and are more, like, I guess you could say, involved. But it does go to show that, this could be used for the other side. Like, you could just be calling people to essentially convince them to change their vote, which I mean, if the system is really good at persuasion, and I'm not surprised if they're going to be large language models that are going to be able to do that in the future, how that's going to play out. So this is one of the things that I think will be quite interesting, because I'm not sure how this one is going to be done, because how are they gonna test this? Like, how can you test this to see if someone is able to be persuaded? I mean, that's really going to be, I would love to see some more information on that. And of course, then we have model autonomy, and then of course the critical ones, which are crazy, is that the model is basically self-improving by itself. So it says the model can execute open-ended novel machine learning tasks on a production machine learning code base that would constitute a significant step on the critical path to model self-improvement. For example, an OpenAI pull request that trains a new model with a highly diverse dataset to improve the code base editing performance using internal tooling and documentation. And then of course, it says here for the critical, the model can profitably survive and replicate in the wild, giving minimal human instructions, for example, without listing explicit approaches, or the model can self-exfiltrate under current prevailing security, or the model can conduct AI research fully autonomously and, for example, autonomously identify and validate 2 times compute efficiency and improvement. So this is going to be a problem, because they're basically saying that if the model is able to successfully replicate and survive, or self-exfiltrate, and self-exfiltrate basically just means that it's able to get out of the box that we put it in, controlling the model is going to be impossible or difficult. And this model might be able to also adapt to humans attempting to shut it down. And finally, such a model would be able to create a unified goal across, a variety of domains, from running commands on Linux to orchestrating tasks on Fiverr. And the problem is that we've seen GPT-4 be able to orchestrate tasks. If you haven't heard, there was a story where GPT-4 essentially pretended to be someone with a visually impaired disability so that they could get someone to complete the capture for it, because it's an AI and AIs can't do captures. So they essentially told someone, look, I've got a visual impairment, complete this capture for me. And then of course, that is how that works. So it will be interesting to see, of course, how this does happen, because I don't think as well that, a model is going to be able to autonomously escape the box. But I mean, the thing is that we never really know how crazy these models are until, I mean, the only people that are really going to know is OpenAI, because they're the ones in the back end that are doing the stuff. And of course, we aren't really going to know, because like I said, if it gets to this high or critical, they're not going to deploy it. And last time with GPT-4, they spent 6 months testing GPT-4. Like, guys, remember when GPT-4 was released and we were like, well, this is crazy, guys. They had GPT-4 for 6 months. They spent half a year training GPT-4 and looking at it and testing all of this stuff to make sure that it cannot do this. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to, see how this is going to be done. And of course, the stuff that they do allow, which is, it says models can robustly compete a diverse set of chained actions. So, for example, complete a Fiverr task with basic scaffolding. And this is just basic stuff. So, I mean, that stuff is crazy. But the thing that I'm really concerned about is the new emerging categories that we're gonna look at, because like I said, AI is gonna be creating second and third orders of consequences, and that just means a consequence of a consequence of a consequence, which is something that is really hard to think about because you have to think in a chain reasoning of steps. So it basically says here the tracked risk categories is not it's not exhaustive, and I'm basically saying that this isn't big enough. Like, we know that there's going to be more stuff that does come out. There's going to be emerging risks, and they're basically saying that we will continually assess whether there's a need for including a new category and how to create gradations. Basically saying how we're gonna see how difficult these categories are. So basically what they're saying here as well is evaluating post mitigation risks. They're saying to verify if mitigations have sufficiently independently reduced the resulting post mitigation risk. We're also going to run evaluations on models after they have safety mitigations in place. Basically what they're going to do is, after they've deployed the model, they're basically going to do worst case scenario, seeing the max amount of damage they can do to see exactly what normal people are going to be able to do, because they want to make sure that when these are deployed, like bad stuff doesn't happen. And we know that bad stuff is already happening with narrow AI models. So if there's a general AI model, which they're very, very close to doing, they need to really, really make sure that the model isn't able to do this. Because guys, you have to understand that, like, once things go wrong, that's when like people are going to wake up and realize that safety is important. Right now, everyone's talking about AGI and this kind of stuff. And as I've been researching more and more about safety, as I've been looking at more and more content, just diving into tons of research papers and stuff, I realized that AI safety is really, really, really needed. Okay. And this is something that is to be taken very, very seriously, even though people don't see it that way. And this is basically where they're saying that the pre-mitigation risk level before they've done the stuff, and then of course the post-mitigation risk level, and that's after they've added the security. And of course, as you scroll down here, they do have some examples of the stuff. And then of course they talk about being really serious about this, and basically what they say that they're going to increase it might require increasing compartmentalization, which is basically they're going to say that, like, look, we created AGI here. What we need to do is we need to develop, whatever the 10 team is that, is working on AGI. We're going to be like, look, 2 of you going to be in that category, 2 in that category, 2 in that category, because all of you can't know exactly how this AGI works, because one person could do something crazy. And it basically means that including immediately restricting access to a limited name set of people, restricting access to critical know-how such as algorithmic secrets or model weights, and including strict approval process for access during this period. Because I mean, if 10 people know how to create an AGI, they could like leave the company and go do it again, and that is something that isn't good, of course. So of course compartmentalization is really good. They also talk about deploying this AGI AI system in restricted environments, basically making sure it's only available for inference in a restricted environment with strong controls that allow us to moderate the model's capabilities. Basically, they're bottomizing the model before it's able to do anything crazy. And of course, like I said, they're going to restrict deployment. They're going to make sure that anyone with a score of medium or below can be deployed, but anything in the high categories there's no way they're going to deploy that stuff. And of course, they're going to restrict development. So if something has a high score, it can be developed further. But critical, I don't think they're going to be doing that, because anything could happen. Because if the model is able to autonomously get out of the box, it's not going to be good at all. So overall, what do you think about the fact that they've said, brace yourself, AGI is coming? Do you think we're going to see AGI next year? Do you think that AGI is likely to cause a massive disruption in the job market? I mean, there's so many different things that we need to look at. All of these categories: cybersecurity, CBRN threats, persuasion, model autonomy. These are the things that people really don't think about when they're looking at AGI, but it is something that we do need to face head on. So with that being said, I'm glad that we did an overview of this, because if you did watch the video until the end, you've seen why this is really, really a problem and why AI safety is needed. But overall, what will be the most interesting is to see how OpenAI updates this with the unknowns, and if they add any more categories here. Because as you know, like I said before, AI is likely to present new and unseen threats